WSBT 22 Suzanne Spencer was the only local reporter at this hearing, and Suzanne, Furlong just admitted this to police yesterday.
To a room full of detectives and in a private room to his family. Now, this is the first time that we're learning details about how she died nearly 8 years ago. We want to warn you, some of these details are disturbing. Furlong told police he lured Parrack, who was riding a bike, into his garage, tied her up, sexually assaulted her, put a bag over her head, and waited until she died. He then took her body and biked to the cemetery. He was questioned initially, but wasn't considered a suspect until August of this year. That's when Furlong was arrested after police say he lured a 10-year-old girl off her bike in this White Pigeon mobile home park, holding her at knife point and attempting to tie her up with extension cords, but that girl got away. DNA swabs in that case matched DNA found on Parrack's body and clothing. The defense and prosecution agreed this day was an important one for the community. In a statement, St. Joseph County Prosecutor John McDonough said it took a long time for Mr. Furlong to come out with exactly what happened. And then he went on to say you would never expect someone like this to be living in your community.
After 8 years, Dan Furlong decided it was time to do the right thing, and instead of dragging the community and the family and the victims through a long mess, it's just time to come clean, and that's what he did.
In Furlong's admission to police, we're told that they were asking about another cold case, that of Brittany Beers, a young girl who vanished from Sturgis back in 1997. Now, we don't know what he told police in that case, but we do know he will undergo polygraph tests as a part of this plea deal, and what he said potentially about the Beers case, but also about the Jodi Parrack case. We also learned new details about that White Pigeon case we told you about and what police uncovered when looking inside of his garage. We're sifting through some of those details, and we'll tell you those at 6. Live in Centerville, Suzanne Spencer, WSBT 22 News.
Want to get to team coverage of this plea. WSBT 22's Suzanne Spencer was the only local reporter at that hearing, and Kelly Stopczynski just got back from Community Reaction talking with people. Let's begin first with Suzanne. This was the first time we were hearing details about what happened the day Jodi was killed.
And it's also the first time Furlong has at all admitted that he was a part of Jodi Parrack's murder. He told that to a room full of detectives, and he also had a private conversation with his family. Now, we want to warn you, some of these details are disturbing. I put a bag over her head and killed her. That's what Daniel Furlong said to police when the judge asked how 11-year-old Jodi Parrack was killed. In details just released, Furlong told police he lured Parrack off her bike into his garage. He tied her up, sexually assaulted her, and waited until she died before dumping her body and bike in a Constantine cemetery. But the link between Furlong and Parrack came 8 years later in August of 2015, when police say Furlong lured a 10-year-old girl into his White Pigeon garage, attempted to tie her up with extension cords, and held her at knife point. She got away. DNA swabbed from that case matched DNA found on Parrack's body and clothing. But also in that garage was a list that Furlong made of young children in his neighborhood. In a statement, St. Joseph County Prosecutor John McDonough said he planned what he did to Jodi Parrack and certainly planned to do it again. Furlong's attorney said today is a day for everyone in the community to heal.
After 8 years, Dan Furlong decided it was time to do the right thing, and instead of dragging the community and the family and the victims through a long mess, it's just time to come clean, and that's what he did.
As a part of this plea agreement, Furlong will now face a second-degree murder charge, and all other charges, including those White Pigeon charges we told you about, will be dropped. The prosecutor told us that he does expect Furlong, though, to spend the rest of his life behind bars. We also know during yesterday's interview with police, detectives asked him about Brittany Beers, who was a young girl who vanished from Sturgis in 1997. We don't know what he told them regarding that case, but we do know he will undergo a polygraph test about that and regarding any information he told them about Jodi Parrack. And during the hearing, Furlong didn't really talk to anyone except his attorney, and when he was addressed by the judge, but on his way out of the courtroom, he did address my photographer and said, "Make sure you get my good side." Jen and Rick.
WSBT 22 Suzanne Spencer is here. And Suzanne, you just returned from talking with Michigan State Police in Paw Paw.
And for 3.5 years, Jennifer, detectives from throughout Michigan tried to find the little girl's killer. But news of yesterday's guilty plea is a chapter closed for the Michigan cold case team. It's the mountains of evidence, thousands of police reports, and things like Jodi Parrack's bike that have consumed Michigan State Police Lieutenant Chuck Christensen's world for the past 4 years.
What I'm showing you is probably 10% of the paperwork that we're talking about here.
Nearly 7,000 documents, dozens of DNA samples, 25,000 man-hours fill an entire room where the cold case team has scoured over the question, who killed Jodi Parrack?
Perfect match. Yep, perfect match.
That perfect match was DNA swabbed from 65-year-old Daniel Furlong after he was arrested for abducting a child and holding her knife point in White Pigeon. That link ultimately led to his arrest in the Parrack case.
You're working day in and day out on one case, and you can't help but bring that case home with you at night and think about it as much as you try not to, because that's your only focus.
It was also a focus of the Constantine Police Department.
This represents just a really very small percentage of the reports that were generated in the case.
Chief Mark Honeysett was chief when Parrack was killed.
I've been in law enforcement for more than 40 years, but nothing quite like this.
He said very few days went by where he didn't think about Jodi's face, but he always had a gut feeling.
The killer's going to be located by accident. Somebody's going to arrest him and collect DNA, and we're going to have a match.
That match, Daniel Furlong, who police say planned Parrack's murder and planned to kill again.
Dan Furlong took down a young girl, and a young girl took down Dan Furlong. There's kind of a poetic justice there.
That young girl, a 10-year-old from White Pigeon, police say he lured her into his White Pigeon garage, held her at knife point, and attempted to tie her up with extension cords, but she got away. Police found her name on a list in Furlong's garage of little girls in his neighborhood. That 10-year-old girl at the top of the list.
What he was trying to do with the list is trying to see what girls he could capture and ones that he can't.
Furlong was charged with kidnapping and assault with a deadly weapon, but part of the plea agreement yesterday in the Parrack case dropped those charges. And should Furlong provide any information to police about any other crimes, he won't be charged. The prosecutor told me whether it's 1 count or 10, Furlong will spend the rest of his life in jail. Rick, they hope that immunity might be able to provide closure to other possible cases that Furlong could be connected to.